I told my kids that mommy need to study, so you need to be in bed.
From my direct reports who have children, I don't really know how they can do it in terms of time management.
It's very impressive because they're effectively doing another job when they get home.
You really need support from everyone around you.
You know, you can tell sometimes it's tough.
Hello, I'm Kritika Adacha and I'm a chartered accountant. I now support accountancy students through their training, and as an educator, I'm regularly up close and personal with some of the common issues people face while studying for and sitting their accountancy exams. So in this series for the ACCA, I'm chatting to experts about strategies we can all use when facing some of life's challenges. This week, we're focusing on the unique complications of being a parent while studying for your ACCA exams. What are the key challenges that parents face? How can a good support system help? And what are some of the tips for carving out time for yourself during this busy period? This is On Your Marks, because you'll never know until you try. Although I don't have direct experience with parenting myself, I'm surrounded by family and friends who are raising kids, and I can see just how much of a full-time job it is, and that's without adding studies or work commitments into the mix. One of the greatest things about the flexibility of the ACCA qualification is that students can pursue them at different stages of life. And I'm sure there are many parents out there who are balancing the demands of parenting with their education. So today I'm excited to be joined by Debbie Oluyemi. She's a finance business partner at Deloitte, and she became a member of ACCA after completing all her exams in 2023, whilst also being a busy mum to her new son. So we've got some real first-hand experience here. Now, Debbie, I'm going to open up with a question about your journey into the qualification. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I started sort of a couple years after uni, getting my first job and started doing my exams. Well, I guess not straight away, but started getting into studying, going into college and just finding my rhythm. So I was able to do that, and, you know, I was lucky enough to be sponsored while doing that, which was great. And essentially that's how my journey started. And a lot of things happened along the way, which I'm sure we'll cover.
Brilliant. So you said you were sponsored. Was that with Deloitte or were you with another employer?
No. So I was with another employer at the time. I started off sort of in the housing sector, studying at that point.
Brilliant. Sounds great. I mean, I started my journey where I was sponsored as well through my qualification. So we've got a commonality there. Yeah. What attracted you to the accountancy profession?
So I guess I always knew I wanted to be an accountant, doing accounting and finance at uni. And then after, there was sort of a question on what I was going to do next, whether I was going to go and do a master's in something else or what sort of qualifications I was going to do. And after sort of doing my research and speaking to people, I found that ACCA was the best fit for me and will sort of help me along my journey to become qualified.
I also did an accounting and finance degree as well, so another commonality there.
Yeah.
A question around what stage were you at in your career when you became pregnant?
So I was sort of mid-level, still like looking, climbing the ladder. But in terms of my exams, I had just started my professional levels then, and it just suddenly happened.
And what was it like? Because obviously transitioning from even the applied knowledge to the professional levels or applied skills even to the professional, it can be a bit of a jump. So how was that transition as well as managing being a parent?
Yeah, it was tough because I was really struggling with one particular exam, I think SBR at the time, and sort of like trying to jump over that hurdle. So yeah, it was tough studying and being quite heavily pregnant and still really determined to get through it at that stage. So it was a leap. It was life transition, professional transition, kind of everything coming at once.
So what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind? You mentioned obviously, you know, it's quite a leap going from strategic business reporting. You were heavily pregnant. Paint us a picture of some of the thoughts that were going through your head at that particular point.
So I think when I found out I was pregnant, I was really determined to do as many exams as I could, because I just knew from speaking to people and you just see that, you know, having a newborn it's hard. It's a massive life transition. I thought I'm going to do as many exams as I can. And when I have my baby, at least I'll kind of be towards the end. But yeah, life doesn't work out the way that you plan. I think coming towards the end of my pregnancy, I gave myself a little bit of grace and said, I've kind of come as far as I can. I managed to pass SBR at the time, which was great. And yeah, it was a tough exam for me. So yeah, I just gave myself some grace and said, I'm going to carry on when I can.
Firstly, congratulations on passing what's a very tough paper whilst
Yeah.
you were going through pregnancy. So well done you for
Thank
persevering. I mean, was the thought to actually try and get your exams completed, knowing that when you have a little one, there's obviously going to be other demands placed on you? So was that where your mindset was at, that you wanted to try and...
Yeah, so I think I was really determined to be able to give all of myself to this new person, but also finishing my exams. It was a big part of it had been a big part of my life, and yeah, I just really wanted to finish, which I'm sure everyone who's studying is kind of waiting for that, light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, I was adamant that I wanted to give myself to this new human and allow myself to kind of take maybe a little bit of a break as well with studying, so I could do that.
And you did you take a break after your little one was born?
I did, yeah. So at that stage, it was just before COVID started happening. So I did take a little bit of a break to kind of just find my feet in motherhood. But I was really lucky to have support as well. So when I did decide to get back into studying and do, my last couple of exams at that point, I did have a really great support system.
It's great you've mentioned support, and we will circle back to that in a moment. But just another question around some of the challenges that you would have faced being a new mother. How was it, sort of coping with a little human? Obviously, you mentioned you've taken a break, after you got pregnant and had your little one. What were some of the challenges you faced as a new mother?
So I think sleep deprivation is a massive one. And I'm sure everyone hears about, the sleep deprivation is just crazy. But I think you can't put it into words how hard it is, because I guess as humans, we're used to getting a certain amount of sleep and being able to function. But I took for granted how big how big of a factor sleep is in just like being able to think straight and function. So I would say that was definitely a massive, massive adjustment. And when I had my little one.
Yeah, sleep is so integral. We've got a really exciting episode on sleep as well. So great for our listeners to check that out. But I'm just thinking about, as well as the lack of sleep, were you also thinking about just having enough time in the day, I suppose, to also get about doing what you would normally have done had you not, if your little human wasn't there? So were there challenges on your time as well through the day?
Yeah, of course. And I think that it's hard to take time for yourself. There's trying to find that window to quickly have a shower, quickly make something to eat, and try to fit as much as you can in a normal day. And I think at that point you think, wow, I had so much time sort of before this human being that I could have done so much more. But yeah, you're just kind of faced with where you are. And yeah, I think the clock just kind of, you lose track of time because you're just constantly doing something, and you've got this person who essentially depends on you to survive. So you've just got to give everything you can.
So paint us a picture then of what your typical day did look like during that particular point.
As a new mum?
Yeah.
So honestly, I think it's such a blur, but from what I can remember, it was honestly just waking up, feeding, getting him ready for the day, getting him just used to this new routine, because whether it was sort of sleep training or just learning who this new person was, it was just always something different, or just going for a walk, trying to get some fresh air, finding a time to, like I say, shower, take a minute for myself. That's essentially how the day looked like.
And was there anything you did in particular to maintain your focus? I know you mentioned you took a bit of a break after you had your little one, but when you got back into your studies and you obviously had this little human to also care for, what were some of the things you kind of implemented to get a bit of focus into your studies?
So I think that for me, it was really important to still try and, I guess, be myself, even though I'm this new person, I'm this new mother, and this person depends on me. It was really important for me to still, be Debbie. And a lot of the things that I did was asking for help, whether I needed to sort of, pop out to the shops and just have that sort of 10 minutes by myself to get my mind right, and also sort of create a schedule. So I knew that I wanted to go back to work sort of after 6 months, which I did. So it was really kind of working towards that schedule and making sure that I was good, my son was good, and everything sort of worked around us. So I think definitely being organised in that sense, mentally preparing myself for that change when it came about was, some of the things that I did.
That sounds great. And well done you for getting back into work within
Thanks.
6 months. I know, there's friends and colleagues and family that I know of that take a lot longer. And it can be
Yeah,
such a challenge as a working mum. You've got a little human, but then you're also studying. So adding that into the
exactly.
mix can make it even more
Yeah.
tough, I suppose. Now, you've mentioned support a couple of times through this conversation. So I guess I want to ask you, what were some of the support mechanisms, or what did you do in terms of getting that support? Were there individuals you relied on? Were there apps or communities? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think my husband was a massive factor in sort of the support. And I think at first it's very much you've been through this experience of, carrying a baby for 9 months and then giving birth. And, you're really sort of precious about this little human. But I think it was important for me to sort of share that load with my husband and let him also do like feeds, for example. So we would sort of alternate feeds. So he would like do a bottle in the night and then, I would breastfeed and things like that. And also had my mum, who was amazing, and she would stay through the night and help when I needed sort of that night to just get some hours in, and sleep. And I think, yeah, just leaning on friends and not being afraid to ask for extra support when you do need it, even if it's, someone coming around to just help you wash up some bottles and just help you do some laundry is a massive help. So I think those are some of the things that I was able to do and lean on my village, essentially.
Yeah, and that's great that you had incredible people
Yeah.
around you, like your husband, your mother, your friends.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people may not always have those solid relationships in their lives. And so in that case, we might rely on other communities or other support networks. Were there any sort of study groups or support networks outside of the close relationships that you've outlined that you also leveraged?
So I think not established groups, but I was able to talk a lot with like old colleagues that I knew had gone through a similar situation or, were working mums, and get advice from them on. And I think sometimes it's not necessarily the physical help, but also that emotional support, speaking to someone who's been in a similar position or is in a similar position to you can also help you feel like you're not alone. So I was able to do that the times when maybe my mum wasn't around or, my husband was working. Speaking to people that had been in my situation was also a form of support. It seems small, but it definitely was a big help knowing that I'm not alone.
Just want to touch on a couple of other bits. So in terms of, undoubtedly through this experience, you might have experienced moments of stress or doubt. I guess my first question is, did you have moments of stress or doubt through this, being a new parent, working and studying? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yes, of course. I think through before having a child, during having a child, I think it's just something that is just part of life. And I think one of my biggest things, having a child and transitioning back into work, especially, was whether I could balance it all. Whether I could be there for my son and still be a working mum, and I guess essentially have a family, run that to the best of my ability and give all of me to that. So I think those are one of the doubts that I really struggled with, dealing with that guilt of being away and, putting my son in nursery, going back to work and working, because at this time was, we were all still working in the office. So yeah, working 5 days in the office and having my son at nursery or having him at my mum, dealing with that guilt was, some of the doubts that I had and things that I had to overcome. And eventually I did overcome that. So those were some of the stresses I dealt with during the way.
And Debbie, you mentioned guilt in that conversation in that particular answer a few times. And my brother, he's had a little one, and I know him and his wife talk about the guilt because their little one's just started nursery as well.
Yeah.
And that's an emotion that a lot of parents don't talk about, right? The
Yeah.
guilt of leaving your little one in the care of somebody else, and they're so little. But then I assume for yourself, you've also got the added kind of, you need to study. So was there any guilt associated or any additional emotions that you experienced when you were like, right, I actually need to study for this exam and I've got to leave my little human in the hands of somebody else? Was there any additional emotions you felt there?
Yeah, of course. I think, there's massive guilt because you're worried about missing milestones, missing moments. And even though, you feel like they're in a trusted environment and they're safe, you still feel that inkling of, like, could I be doing more? Could I be there a bit more? And I think especially during studying, so you've got the mix of being a mum, working, studying, and you just feel like it's just an overwhelming time. But for me, I really had to remind myself that I'm not just doing this for me, I'm also doing this for my son, because as soon as I finish all of these exams, I can invest more time in doing all of those things that, you know, he'll love, I'll love, my family, we can all enjoy this additional free time that I've got. And essentially it's for the benefit of us all and my career and being able to put us in a better situation.
That's a great motivator as well. It's almost like you had that North Star in sight of what your end goal was and the benefit it's going to have not just to yourself, but your family and your time. Yeah. And did you feel a sense of pressure to do things a certain way because you were reading about it or because your village was saying, do it this way?
Yeah, I think definitely at first, because like I mentioned, the sleep deprivation, just having this little human that depends on you can be really overwhelming. It can cloud your mind. So there was a lot of pressure to do things a certain way and also decide, what do you listen to? Do you listen to what's online, or do you listen to your family, or do you listen to yourself? I think trying to filter out all of those thoughts, it was a difficult time. And yeah, it took a while to actually kind of just trust myself and pick what was right and ignore the rest.
What were the sorts of things you did to unwind and relax and perhaps not feel so guilty about, you know, some of the emotions that you were experiencing?
So I really got into, I've always sort of been into working out, but I think having my son, I started getting into sort of running, which helps massively because then we kind of got hit with COVID and, you know, everyone at the gym was shut down. So I think some of the things that I helped to sort of unwind was being outdoors, going for runs and taking that moment to really just clear my head, get some fresh air. So I was able to do that. And yeah, just meeting up with my friends when I could as well. That also helped sort of not allow me to forget I'm a mum, but just remind myself of, like, you know, me as a person and having that girly time or just having a drink with colleagues. And yeah, those are sort of things that helped me unwind.
Yeah, remembering a sense of you again, because I think you mentioned that earlier in the conversation as well, that you are Debbie. You wanted to retain that sense of identity for yourself. So it seems like, you know, the sorts of things you were doing helped you do that, the exercise, which is, you know, great. We've had other experts on other episodes talk about the benefits of exercise, and it seems like that's helped yourself in this situation. I mean, you're qualified now, which is fantastic, right? But is there anything you would have done differently if you were to look back on your experience and your journey?
I think at the start, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to kind of almost sprint through the journey of ACCA, especially because there were a lot of people around me that, you know, I left uni with that doing ACCA and, you know, maybe they qualified before me or they were kind of passing exams quicker. At the beginning stages, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself and sort of looked around to see what everyone else was doing. But I think if I could go back and change that, I wouldn't. I'd just kind of focus on my own race, because the great thing with doing ACCA is that it doesn't really matter what life experience is or, you know, what you go through in life. There's always that time to fit it in. If you decide to take a break or you decide to do it quickly, you can do that. And I was one of the people that did it sort of at a slower pace and took my time. So yeah, I think if I could go back, I would take that pressure off myself and give myself a bit more grace to go through the journey.
Thank you for sharing that so candidly, because actually that point about comparison, it's something that has popped up on a few episodes as well with some of the experts. As humans, we're so wired to compare ourselves to our peers or others that are in the same position. And we almost need to just not do that.
Exactly, yeah.
So, thank you for spotlighting that.
Yeah.
I guess my final question to you would be around the advice that you might give to others that are going through something similar, you know, being a new parent or perhaps they're pregnant whilst they're studying. What would your advice be?
I think give yourself time, because you don't have to do everything at once. Lean into what feels right. So if it is sort of doing your exams while you're pregnant or while you have your little one, that's great. But if it's to take a break and then pick it up a little bit later, that's also fine as well. And if you can get the support physically, emotionally, do that. And don't be afraid to ask for help. And don't feel like you need to take on the world, because you don't. And, you know, people are, for the most part, kind and generous. And, you know, you can lean into that support if you have that there. So I think that would be my advice.
Thank you. And we have this thing, a tradition rather, on our On Your Marks episodes where we always wrap up with 3 top tips. And I know I've just asked you a question about advice,
Yeah.
but if you were to summarise 3 top tips from our conversation today, what would they be for our listeners?
So I would say run your own race, ask for support where you can, and find something that helps you sort of decompress and take off the stress and the burden if you can, like working out or hobby. Those are like my top tips.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing those insights. That's it from this episode of On Your Marks. Thank you, Debbie, for chatting with me today. For more information about ACCA exams, you can go to www.accaglobal.com/exams. See you next time. I'm Kritika Adatia, and this has been On Your Marks.